Natasha, welcome back. What an amazing week. How are you today?
Here we are. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. It's really good to see you again. It has been an incredible week. A lot to discuss. But I want to start off with, I thought about how we could start each of these conversations off. And I'd really like to start off with what inspired you this week, either who or what.
I love that.
Tell us what inspired you or who.
Good one. It's a who, and I actually saw him today. So when he listens, shout out to my friend Javi. So we have my boyfriend and I have a really good friend, Javi, he's a Marine.
Hoorah.
I said that for you. He started his own business. He's just been a really good friend for a long time, and I've always rooted for him. And so I've been seeing him, come up and do his thing, but especially this week. So I got to visit him at one of his properties. So he took we'll call it a leap, a chance, whatever, and he did something that we've been talking about for a long time. So outside of just his business, he's working on flipping his first property.
Very exciting.
Yeah, so I got to actually go check it out. And it's not like I don't know houses are obviously built by people, but to see something that one of your friends or somebody that you know created, built from the ground up, and just to see the before and the after and hear him talk about the process was super inspiring. So I could just feel his passion, and it just reminded me that those are the good things. So for Javi, when he listens, he knows that we're rooting for him. But yeah, he was my inspiration for the week.
Well, I love it. Well, great work, Javi. Nice to meet you virtually, and thank you for sharing. I have one as well. So there's different people that inspire me from time to time, and all of my kids are an inspiration, and all of their significant others, and they make me very, very proud. But this week I've been really inspired by Megan. So she's my soon-to-be daughter-in-law coming up in April, and she's just a very, very special woman. So she is a moderate to severe special education teacher. She works with younger men and women from 15 to 22 years old. So it just takes a very special person to do what she does, and all of the extra in the administration and working with the parents and working with the schools. We've had some conversations. And in addition to what she's doing as a teacher, she's also working on her master's. She has our 2 beautiful grandbabies, which made me a grandfather.
Yeah.
And then I see her posts on all of the social media that I don't know how to work, that she's at the gym like at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night. So, and she's my son, his love of his life. So she's just been an inspiration to me this week in the conversations I had with her. So I wanted to shout her out.
Oh, that's incredible. Really, really incredible.
It is. So before we get into the topics that we want to discuss, I had a lot of questions this week, and a lot of those questions were about you.
After we released episode 1. Questions about me?
Yeah, questions about you. So let's talk about Natasha.
Hit me with them.
Single, married, kids. Do you work at the circus? Like, who's Natasha? What do you do? Who are you?
We gotta keep some mystery. No, so not single. Happily in a relationship going on. I'm basically married. We'll call it that, right? It's been 11 years now.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So relationship, 2 dogs, no kids, and I don't work at the circus.
What's your profession? What are you in? What do you do? Not who you work with, but or work for, but what do you do?
So I am currently the director of a sales team. So I work in health insurance, and I am responsible for the sales and service teams for individual and group insurance sales.
Well, excellent. So a little bit about Natasha. I'm glad you didn't go with podcaster because...
darn it. I know. I'm not giving myself enough credit yet. Oh, I actually had a question about you as well.
Sure. Throw it at me.
They want to know if you're really my grandpa.
Oh my gosh. Okay. We can go right past this. I am a grandfather, but I'm not your grandfather. Okay. Let's transition. So I know we did talk this week, and we both received a ton of questions, and I was surprised. So I'm excited for those that actually listened, see how many continue to listen. But I was most surprised at how many topics people threw at us to say, hey, could you talk about this or could you talk about that? And then I had a couple of good friends, I think they may have had a glass of wine or two, said, hey, I want to be on the show.
Oh, yeah, there was hands raised. Like, oh, let me know when you need a guest. I was like, all right, well, so we'll work it in.
So we are going to have plenty of content. But what we're going to talk about today, or what I want to talk about, let's talk about leadership and some very specific parts of leadership. And so let me start by asking you a question. When you think of leadership, what are some of the attributes of a leader? What comes to your mind?
Oh, I love this question. One, I'm obsessed with leadership. Being a leader versus a manager, like all the things I could talk about all day. But if we're talking characteristics, is that the question of
characteristics, attributes? Well, how do you define a leader?
Yeah.
And this could be a leader at work, it could be within your community, at the church, anywhere, just leadership in general.
Well, that's what I think is great about it, because I think you are a leader, or can be a leader in different aspects of your life. So a couple things when I think about leadership, I guess just, we'll go character traits. So first, I think you have to be strong. So leaders, there's, emotional, mental, all of those things. If you really want to be a good leader, whether it's at work or at home or just in a one-on-one relationship, whatever it might be, to really be strong and be able to, be the face in that, I think is important.
Agreed.
I think influence, right? So the idea of being a leader, so a manager, you can get people to do things. But a leader, I think you bring it out in others. So I think you have to be influential. You have to be able to connect with people and tap in and actually impact them. It's not about you anymore. It's about whether it's your family or, teachers do it with children or at work or whatever it might be. So strength, influence, and communication. So communication is to either articulate your ideas or articulate what you need from people, what you can do for people, how you can progress the group, whatever the group means in your situation forward. I think communication's absolutely key.
Yeah, we're aligned there. So leadership across the board is incredibly important, whether you're building a team at work and a culture, you're doing it within your family. Everybody has a different role as a leader, and everybody is looking to somebody as their leader. There's times that I didn't even realize people were looking at me in a particular setting and they thought I was the leader. I was like, this isn't my role, but it is. So you have to be aware of that at all times. And so along with what you said, I also have down emotional intelligence and effective communications. So, you and I have talked a lot about this, and one of the mantras that I have is people will never remember. They're not going to remember the goals that we had this week, this month, this year, for the most part. Maybe you have some tough projects, but people are always going to remember the way that you led and the way that you made them feel. And so if you think back right now to this date 3 years ago, you can't tell me what project you were working on.
No, not at all.
But you can tell me who you were working with and who was around you. And you can tell me who made you smile and who you just was like, I'm going the other way in the break room.
Yeah, very true. Very true.
And this is true of whether it's in your work environment, if you've been on a baseball field, you've been in a basketball court, football, you've been in church. It doesn't matter where you're at. You know those people who make you feel good and automatically make you smile or you want to engage with. And you also know those that you say, you know what? This is going to be a conversation that I want to just hopefully get through as quickly as possible and move on. So it's important to remember that as you're engaging with other people.
And if I can add there, one is when people are looking at you, like you mentioned, being the leader, but you remember people who made you feel that way and brought out. So that's one thing is like, I remember or know who brings out the best in me, right? Who you surround yourself with. And so I think you kind of... whether you self-identify as a leader or in your group of friends or your family, I feel like people kind of know, like, they gravitate towards who's the leader in some of those situations.
Yeah, it's interesting. I wasn't planning on talking about this today, but I'm going to ask you a question, and I'm wondering do you think you know what it's going to be?
No, I have no idea.
Okay, so if you had to identify yourself as a cat or a dog, And I've asked this question to you before. How would you identify yourself? And for those listening, well, are you a cat person? Are you a dog person? That's an important question.
Oh, I'm dog for sure.
Yeah,
For sure, dog.
I like to think I'm a dog. Sometimes I'm a cat. And every time I ask this question, people are like, what are you talking about? I have a dog or I have a cat. But when you think about when you come up to somebody and you see them for the first time, or you're walking into a party, or you're walking into the office, or you're in the grocery store, and you see someone that you know, you're going to react one of two ways, right? That person that makes you feel good, your tail starts wagging, your face lights up, and you're like, hey, how are you doing? How's it going? And you get really excited, and all of a sudden they're excited to see you, and you just get into a conversation. That's the dog person.
Yeah.
And you know, the cat person, you walk into the house and the cat's behind the blinds, like, I don't need to come see you. You'll feed me, you'll take care of me. And we've come across those people as well, whether you're at a sporting event, you're in the office, again, you see them and they go the other way, or they come towards you, don't even get a smile. You're like, ooh, what happened? What did I do? And you have a certain reaction to that.
Yeah.
So as I've mentored or I've trained people, as I try to put that image in their head, you can be a cat or a dog. And every day you engage with someone, they're going to remember you a certain way. And you probably want to be remembered as that big Labrador retriever that's just always good to see and always ready for a big hug. So keep that in the back of your mind, the cats and the dogs.
Yes. We all have our cat days too. Sometimes we're like, oh man, they caught me. They'll forever think that you're a cat. You could, leave that impression.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We all have those days. And it's good to be able to recognize it or have people around you that recognize it. And I'll joke with Amy or the kids and say, you're having a cat day. And sometimes that backfires, but at least I can call it out and I say, oh, okay. I know what's going on because we have that type of relationship.
Yeah, it doesn't work in the office either. You hit me with that one.
I do my best not to communicate to the people around me if they're a cat or dog for the day. If they're a dog, it's really easy. So let's transition. Let's talk about culture and the culture that leaders create and how they create it. And not just leaders, but I think it's important to call out in relationships as well. This can be whether it's a friend, a coach, coworker, or if you're leading a massive organization. Let's talk about mistakes.
Oh, good one. You're right. Culture, so the environment you create or the feeling, because people have to be in on it, right? If you're a leader, by definition, you have other people in the group, right? That, and maybe sometimes if you're not, everybody brings an energy to a situation. So creating that environment specifically where people can make mistakes is something you actually brought up very early and when we started working together. So it's been an interesting one for me to learn along the way.
And I think this is where Grandpa and the Millennial comes in the most. Because when I think back to where my career started, it was in the Marine Corps. And when somebody made a mistake, and if I was their direct leader, they were either doing 1,000 push-ups, running 5 miles, they were scrubbing toilets, or they were raking dirt. And we embarrassed each other, forever. Never made the mistake twice, most of the time. There were a few that did, but that's one leadership style. And it's important in that environment, and there's a way to do it. It doesn't work now. As I've transitioned over, 25, 30 years, the leader I was last week is not the leader I am today, or the leader I was a year ago or 5 years ago. So as I talk through this, it's important to remember, and people that I've worked with, I've evolved. I hope everybody evolves. So you're going to evolve.
Well, yes, which is so funny to hear you. Okay, so one, I'm not a Marine, and I'm sure that environment is obviously different. But it's so funny because literally the first lesson, I didn't know it was a lesson at the time, so I take that back. One of the first things I ever remember you telling me was that I was going to make a mistake that you would have to sign a check for. And in my mind, I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, he's telling me like I'm gonna mess up. You were dead set, like it's gonna happen. But you were like, I'll write a check, and you said there's nothing you can do that I can't or we can't fix. Like that to this day in my brain, I remember it word per word. So it's so funny to hear, like obviously it was different, but to your point of evolving, I think it's funny. My first impression of you was like that conversation, and that obviously created an environment and a culture for me to do, what I wanted to do without being afraid of making those mistakes.
Well, that's good. And it is a learned behavior. And whether it's as a leader in the working environment or with my children or being married for 25 years, it's like I said, there's been a long journey of evolving, and I'm still not there. And you try to pass this on to those and mentor the younger generations as we have these conversations so that you can see it and you don't make the same mistakes that I made and have to feel some of the pain that I did. But it is important in that culture creating. So
why do you think, like, why would you say something like that, or why do you think that it's important to?
Because I can remember when I made mistakes and I was coming up. So take the Marine Corps and the military out of it. That's completely separate. But when I came into the corporate world and I made a mistake where we had to refund a customer or I had to call back a customer and explain what happened, I had leaders that made it uncomfortable and told me how big of a mistake it was, and did I not, read the manual, or did I not understand what was supposed to happen? And so that stuck with me, and how I felt going into my next task, or when I needed to communicate to any other leaders what type of environment I was in, to say, hey, I made a mistake. It changed the way I went about my day.
Yeah.
So what about you? So when you think about mistakes and some of the mistakes that you've either made or people have made that either reported to you, friends, family, what are the feelings? What are some of those emotions that come to mind?
Oh, good question. So one, staying on how, like, being the one in the environment where I knew it was okay to make a mistake, I think having that support and knowing that, one, to call out that you are going to make mistakes, like that's a for sure, right? It's not a if you do. That gave me just a comfort, maybe. I don't know if I'd say confidence, but I wasn't afraid to make mistakes. I didn't want to, right? You never go into something thinking like, oh yeah, it's fine if I fail, or it's fine if I make a mistake. But knowing that if you're just giving your best and a mistake happens, right, that you're supported. So I think being on the other end of that just gave me a comfort that I could focus on the other things I should have been doing, rather than worrying about like, oh my gosh, does my boss not like me or think I'm incapable or whatever that might be. I could actually focus on like, hey, what do I actually need to do to be productive or win my day or whatever that might be. When I look at being the other end of that, so maybe it's by good example, right? Now as a leader, I think instilling that in my people, because I want them to have that same feeling, I think is really important. And then I've helped people through some mistakes, and I think having understanding, and some people will come to you like you're like their world is about to end, right? They're worried about what you're going to say, or they're afraid of disappointing you. I think that's a really big one. People don't want to disappoint you, whether that's, because they don't want to lose their job or just because they really respect you or whatever that might be. So I think helping people, the feeling when I did support somebody through a mistake and they understood like, hey, it's, we learn from it, we grow, I have your back. That has been impactful to me, because then, they don't make the mistake again, they grow, they then go and let the next person run into something and then they support them too. So it's just it's a chain reaction.
Yeah. And I think you said something very important, and I know this has been said a million different ways, and I'll say it the way that I remember it, but nobody wakes up in the morning and says, yeah, I'm going to go make this mistake today. Now, we could have a whole nother topic on, people who have a strategy or they have an agenda, and I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about genuine mistakes. People wake up with the best intentions, and if you go about your day and your interactions with people and you remember that, and the mistake comes across, whether, like I said, it's personal or professional, you can look at it with different perspective, and you can have empathy. So what do you think it creates for those individuals that come to you and they've made a mistake? What are you fostering, and what do you see from that individual after those conversations in the short term and then in the long term? So this is for that person, and then the culture that you're creating. What do you see?
Good question. Well, one, I think if people aren't afraid to have the conversation, and this is whether it's in a personal relationship or at work, right? If they're afraid of how you're going to act when they make a mistake, they might tell you they made a mistake, but they might not give you all of the information. They might not get to the point of like, why did you make the mistake? To your point, they didn't choose to make it, right? Something caused them, whether they didn't have enough information, whether they don't, maybe have resources or whatever it is. Like, there might be a reason why they made a mistake and they just need to know. I've had a lot of people do that and they're like, oh, I just didn't know. I really struggle like finding the information, whatever. Perfect. We can work through that. But if you don't give them that environment or know that they can come to you, I mean, what kind of leader would you be? Like that, it's so counterintuitive to what you're doing if you don't allow them to. You want to make them better, right? So if they were already great, they don't need you. So you need to create the ability for them to do that. And then your second question was how they go and take that, right? So I've had people sit down, right, and you have those hard conversations like, hey, this didn't work out, or hey, you did it wrong, whatever it might be. But made a mistake, I have your back. One thing, they just appreciate so much that you have their back, right? So you can tell when somebody is just like so grateful, and then coming out of it, like I said, they likely won't make the mistake again. They understand where you're coming from. They're more likely to be honest with you moving forward. It just creates a much stronger relationship. And then down the line, right, they're going to start to treat others that way and just, tenfolds the environment. So I think just seeing them come out on the other side is what you want, right? A mistake is, look at intent. Mistake, I mean, I haven't looked up the definition, but by definition, I'm sure it was like not meant to happen. So watching them grow from it is the good stuff, I think.
Yeah, so I'll add to it. And I'm very visual, so I have to have like this PowerPoint in my head. Yeah. So I see this fork in the road. And when you get to that fork in the road, that's where the mistake happens. And we're the leaders, or the people that are listening. You're the leader in the way you're going to engage with that person. And I've been in at that fork in the road, and I've had to have the conversation, and it's going to go one of two ways. And if it's not handled right, I'm going to go down the left side, and I'm going to shut down. I'm going to be embarrassed. And as I'm going through my work, I'm going to be incredibly cautious. I'm going to lack creativity. I'm going to lack engagement, and I'm going to lack passion. Versus if I have that support and someone says, it's okay, I made that same mistake. I know exactly what, not only did I make that mistake, I probably made it 5 times. And I'm going to write this check. Yeah. Or whatever the mistake was, we all make it. So I'm no better than anybody else. And you accept that, and how bad is it going to be? I can't remember the mistake I made 4 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago. So if you give that support, then in my mind, it's the fork on the right side. That person, now you're building a bond and you're building a relationship and trust, and they feel engaged and they feel passionate and creative, and they work with a different freedom that they wouldn't be able to if they went down the left side of the road. So I encourage everybody to think about when someone comes to you and they've made a mistake, which path are you taking them down? And how do you want to be viewed? Are you trying to build a bond and make this person a better person and have a better relationship with them and create freedom and engagement? Or do you want to let them know, and do you want to be right? Say, I told you, I knew you were going to make this mistake. Look at me, I'm right. And that will last you a solid 10, 15 minutes. You can talk about it at your dinner parties or at the gym or wherever you gossip, and then you've pretty much destroyed a relationship. It will never be the same. So I think it's very important to visualize, however you visualize, but what type of leader, what type of friend relationship do you want to be in? So that's how I'm viewing it.
And your reactions to situations. So question to the, I don't know if it's the definition or the principle, the difference between a bad choice and a mistake. What do you think? Is there a difference?
I think there is a difference. So, and it's nuanced. Mm-hmm. I think that you can make a bad choice that is a mistake because you don't have all of the facts and you don't understand the environment, or you don't understand all of the nuance of the decision that you're making. And then I think there's just outright bad choices that you shouldn't make, and you make a decision that you're going to go down that path, and that's not a mistake. That's a bad choice. So if you were to go rob a bank today, regardless of what the reason is, to me, that's a bad choice. There's other options that you can go down and try to exhaust before you have to go down. It's still a mistake, but that's a bad choice. And that's one that we all know. Robbing a bank, everyone's like, oh, I wouldn't rob a bank. Well, people do.
Yeah.
So that, again, the visual for me, I have to have the visual. So that's how I would see it. Great question.
It was just something I was like, because I think sometimes people call it a mistake later, right? So you make a choice, and if it doesn't come out the way that you wanted to, or you don't like the outcome, all of a sudden it's a mistake. And maybe what you think is a mistake, I don't necessarily think is a mistake. So I think sometimes there's perspective there. So it was just something I was pondering.
I love it. So this takes us down a little bit of a different road. So this also comes to accountability.
Oh, yes.
So this is one of my mantras, and we'll talk about it in another conversation, but attitude and effort. Those are the only two things that you and I can control, is our attitude and our effort. So when somebody makes a mistake, we can control the way that we react to it and the effort that we put into that person. I can't control your accountability. So if you make a bad choice, even if I do everything right and I try to support you and show you what I think is the right way, or give you feedback, or someone else does, if you don't have accountability and you're looking for a way out, then that's a decision that you're making. And I have to be good with that I've done everything in my power to do what I feel is right and be at peace with it. And that bad choice or that mistake might happen again. Again, we can only control our attitude and effort. You can't control other people.
True. And I think it's the intent you have to... So that is one thing I look at. When somebody makes a mistake, always first intent, right? Was it truly on accident? Did they really not know, right? Robbing a bank, obviously that is... your intent was to do something that you know is illegal, or whatever that might be. So I think intent is really... And to me, it makes sense then. Like, why would you go at somebody for making a mistake when they really didn't know? And especially when it's like a low level, not even a leader, but maybe just a mid to low level, I don't know, rep or agent, whatever is, or your kids, I would assume, right? I just think it's important. You always have to judge their intent, and that might change the conversation. And then accountability after. If you're not there's some people be like, oh, I want to make mistakes, I want to fail, that means I'm growing. Like, yes, you don't want to. You just want to be able to handle what comes after. So can you take a mistake gracefully, or can you learn from it and grow? So I think that is where the accountability comes in. And as long as you're learning from it and moving on, then good for you.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I think there's calculated risk where we've all made a decision, and it's at the moment, with all of the facts that we have, we believe we're making the right decision. And then when we look back, we said, I didn't see it that way. Hindsight's always 20/20. But our intent at the moment was pure. And so all of us have to take that into consideration.
So your kids are probably listening to this podcast, and they're probably like, oh, Dad, that would have been nice when you were, getting on me for my mistakes. So I don't have kids. So from the parent perspective, any difference? Obviously you're closer to your kids than like somebody at work or whatever. So does that change how you react to that? It's more because you're more connected, I would assume. I don't know.
So I would say at a high level, no, now. So yes. So my kids, when we look back at some of the things that I reacted to.
Oh, I can't wait to hear their feedback.
By no means was I perfect. I yelled at them. They did simple things that got on my nerves on a particular time, or I didn't articulate, or I didn't communicate in the most effective way. And you learn as you grow, and you look back, and those are some of the regrets I would assume that most parents have when they say, oof, if I only would have, had this wisdom. I don't know that I would have been better now than I would have been 15 years ago. Yeah. But I still would have made mistakes. And I still make mistakes with my kids. But yes, it's changed the way that I communicate. And now I look at them and remember when I was their age, and 28 and be 25, 21, and the mistakes I made, much different than the mistakes my kids are making. I couldn't be more proud of what they're doing.
Let me lighten up a little bit. No, it's interesting. And then it's just a whole chain, right? Like, you make mistakes and how you handle their mistakes. It's just a whole thing, and you learn and you grow. Again, accountability. So it's cool to see you come out of it.
Just good. What other questions do you have? Do you have any other questions or?
Oh, I don't think so. I think you had kind of asked me about like helping somebody through. So any standout, like if you were gracious with somebody in their mistake and how they reacted to it, like anything stand out? Anybody surprised by you supporting them through a mistake, or super grateful, or I don't know. And maybe you don't have anybody, but those are the only things I was thinking.
I think that as I reflect back on life, there's probably been some big mistakes and some choices that have been made that have impacted my life. And, as we're deep in the conversation, one that, comes to mind is my biological father, who I can't even remember what age he left, 7 or 8 years old. And whatever the reason was, I don't know. And I have a great, my dad, who I call dad, is fantastic. He raised me. He's dad. But my biological left. And there's choices in there and there's mistakes in there. And I talked to him when I was 18, and I had to go through that. And I'm one of millions of people that have gone through the same, journey. But for me, I had to forgive at some point, and I have. I don't know why those choices were made or why that mistake was made, and maybe someday we'll have a conversation. But I've forgiven, and I don't hold on to that. So. Yes, that would probably be I probably have 4 or 5 big ones that I can think of off the top of my head. That would be one of the big ones.
Yeah. No, interesting. I get it. I think we can't preach about, supporting people through their mistakes. And like hindsight's always 20/20. So I can have similar thoughts and just think like, okay, now obviously you grow, you get older, you experience things, and you look back and you're like, okay, I'm going to be gracious with people about certain things or their mistakes or how you react to them. Sometimes it makes you question how you handle things or question other people's mistakes. So I just think it's interesting. It could go all day.
Yeah, we could sit here for hours and talk through this. And I've enjoyed the conversation. Every time we get together and while we're doing this and we're recording it, we have these conversations quite a bit. Yeah. And so we're sitting in our wink wink studio with a bottle of wine, talking about mistakes and culture and just to bring this conversation to an end. Yeah. What I take away from this and what's important to me and for people to understand is, again, people aren't going to remember what you were working on or what the situation was. They're only going to remember the way that you made them feel. And we all have a responsibility to make people feel comfortable and safe and good when appropriate. And if you take that approach, I promise you, from the grandpa's wisdom, your relationships will be much better. And the things that you get frustrated with or upset with when people make a mistake, they're really not that big of a deal. For the most part, you can overcome anything. And it's easier said than done. I'm by far not perfect, and I still react. And there's probably people that listen that have a list of things that I've overreacted to, and I own them all. But I try. Yeah. And if you can go into each day trying, I think that you'll have a positive influence on people.
Yeah, it's all about the intent, and I think that you're right. We grow and we change in what we're thinking, and I'm not quite as old as you, but I think I can even look back and realize like, yeah, it didn't matter. There's things. I always love when you're like so upset about something and you just remember like, oh my gosh, I really don't like that person. And then someone's like, well, why? And you're like, oh, I can't really remember. You might remember, but if it's not like huge, like, what are you doing? Get on with it, So anyway, but that's, forgiveness can be its own thing, or moving on, or reactions, things like that can be different. So, interesting coming out of it.
Well, good. So we are working on a lot. We have some social media sites that are going up. We are on Spotify now, which I don't know how any of this works. You're teaching me.
Yes, we just need subscribers. Remember, tell people to subscribe.
I just enjoy having the conversation. So if people subscribe, we love it.
All right, you talk, I'll post.
Yeah, you post. So I'll leave you with my thought, and then you can go ahead and close it out. But I would challenge everybody, the same way we started off our conversation today, is to find someone or something that inspires you tomorrow and this week. And hopefully you listen to us week to week, and when you come back and we talk about what inspired us, you can think back about what inspired you. And there is something in everybody. So find it. It'll change your day, I promise you.
Yeah, be a light and look for a light.
Absolutely.
All right, is that it?
That's it for me.
All right, Gramps and Millennial, out.